What's up, everybody? Welcome to In the Trenches here on the PFF NFL show, where we take a look at impactful trench play around the NFL and break it down from an analytical and X's and O's perspective. I'm Trevor Sikkema. Appreciate everybody watching the first episode here of this show. We're very, very excited about it, and I'm very, very excited about it because of my co-host that I get to have all year long, getting to talk offensive and defensive line play. It is the one and only Ollie Connolly. You may know his work from his incredibly successful Substack that he has, as well as the Audible and Analytics podcast. Ollie, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great. It's great to be with you.
I appreciate you joining me, man. This is going to be a lot of fun. This is something that at PFF we're thinking about. Hey, what do people really want to hear the most outside of the review and the preview podcast, which we know everybody loves because we're talking all 32 NFL teams. When we really get to break down what happened around the NFL every week, people want to talk about quarterbacks, which we'll get to, we promise, but then they immediately want to get to the trenches. All right, what happened up front? Because we know that is such a major storyline and an impactful part of what the result was at the end of the game on the scoreboard. So, dude, I'm so excited to have you here with me on this journey. First of all, just how has everything been during the summer, building up to this season? How you feeling headed into things now that we got the ball finally kicked off?
I feel really excited. Just some of the trends around the league are really awesome to track. That's kind of my main bag and trade. And so looking forward to seeing how those kind of follow through in the early weeks. Feel refreshed. Usually I feel drained through the draft season and maybe I get a week here or there, but I've had some time, Trev. I am fired up. I can't wait to do the show with you. That's bringing me all kinds of joy and energy. So just looking forward to it.
The trends, man. I mean, I think that's something that I'm really looking forward to talking about with you as we go through this throughout the entire season. Is you do such a great job really being able to look at the league and just say, hey, this is kind of what I'm noticing of what's being really successful, what teams are really doing, and we're hoping to sort of get an angle on that, maybe even before everybody else does, as we talk about this show every single week. Before we dig into it, because we got a really good topic of what happened in one of the biggest games over the past week. As a busy parent, look, we all want our kids to be happy and successful. We know that. Financially independent, that's a big way that they can do that. With a UGMA account from Fabric by Gerber Life, you're arming your child with a powerful financial tool to help shape their journey towards financial success. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a UGMA account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. Now, UGMA, it stands for Uniform Gifts to Minors Act. While your kid cannot invest while they are minors, a UGMA account allows you to invest on their behalf and gives their investments more time to grow, which is fantastic. Plus, you can share your child's unique gift link with family and friends. So instead of maybe toys that they might outgrow or birthday special occasions, whatever, they might be able to help your family's financial future instead if they want to go that route. No contribution limits, multiple tax advantages, SIPC insured up to $500,000. No commission fees, just a low flat monthly maintenance fee. You join the thousands of parents today who trust Fabric to protect their family. Start investing in your child's future today at meetfabric.com/NFL. That's MEET fabric.com/PFF NFL. Portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Monthly minimum contributions are required. Learn more at meetfabric.com. All right, so Ollie, we're recording this on a Tuesday for full transparency for everybody. And so the game that we're going to start things off with is almost a week old at this point. But it was the game that we were talking about forever, right? Since the NFL schedule came out, Ravens Chiefs. And it was a big one. It came down to the wire, truly a game of inches at the very end with a toe or even a toenail being what really stopped the Ravens from tying this game up and us getting into overtime. But the trenches, I think, were a big part of why this game ended up being what it was. And obviously we love to talk about Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and all that kinds of stuff. But what happened up front was a big telling point of what the scoreboard was at the very end of the game. When you went back and you watched this close contest between two teams that have Super Bowl aspirations or playing at a really high level, what did you notice in the trenches that you really wanted to talk about most?
Yeah, I think obviously the Ravens line is a problem. And I think we'll talk about that probably throughout the season. I think what really jumped out to me was just how Spagnuolo attacked the issues with the offensive line mentally as much as it was physical and the play on the field. And sometimes you watch games and you say, that is a really great game plan. It's almost intellectually impressive, a great whiteboard game plan. You go, wow, this guy's really good. The thing with Spagnuolo that always jumps out to me is just how the game plan is so tied to the skill sets of his players and tied to kind of the advanced scouting of how to expose issues in the opposition. So what he did to just put particularly those three interior guys, mostly the two guards, into just complete binds, knowing that was a weak point of the offensive line, knowing I could move pieces around, knowing that if we could get Lamar slightly frazzled, then we could kind of throw a curveball going into the second half. And he kind of really changed things up as they went through the game in terms of how trying to expose that offensive line. So I just thought all around tying kind of the scheme, game plan to the skills of the players was as good as you'll see.
Now, the Ravens, when I was looking at their PFF grades just as a whole from the offensive line, and we'll get to the interior guys because I do think that's a great point that you mentioned. Their overall offensive line grades, I believe, were ranked 24th on the week now that we have all the games in there. And they gave up the fifth most pressure. They gave up 15 pressures in total last week. And Steve Spagnuolo is one of the best defensive coordinators in the game, right? About just using his defensive linemen, and I would even say overall front seven players, because we see this with Nick Bolton when Willie Gay was there, right? We see it with Leo Chanel. Like, just they're not afraid to use their guys in so many different ways and different alignments. I mean, for goodness sake, we all saw the meme of Justice Hill going one-on-one with Chris Jones, and it's like, how did we get to that point? And I think a lot of people were sort of dunking on the Ravens a little bit for that, but I don't think that was by design from the Ravens. They didn't know that was going to happen. I think that was a Steve Spagnuolo kind of masterpiece right there. But when you look at how the Ravens struggled, in particular to what they want to do as a football team, again, just was it more of you just got a hat tip to one of the best defensive coordinators in the game in Spagnuolo, or was it something that you are still really concerned with the Ravens that they just have to get better at?
Yeah, I'm concerned with the one-on-one talent for sure. I just don't think it's good enough. I don't think it's athletic enough, and I think that's a real issue. What I will say with Spagnuolo is kind of his imprint going into the game was, we are going to leave the interior guys uncovered. We're going to have these giant bubbles in the B gap, and we're going to wander people around. Guys will walk in there, walk out, we'll run overload fronts, all kind of cool, creative, exotic things. But when you look at the blitz rate, you look at the pressure rate, and you look at the paths, that's kind of something I always go through is forget the overall rate. What was the intent of the rate, right? Is it all concentrated in one area? Is it flying guys from all different angles? His entire game plan was, I want to penetrate the B gap bubble where I can get, it's so much easier as an offensive coach to say, if you've got guys you think maybe aren't quite up to it, or they're starting their first game or whatever it is, if there's a guy right over them, right, it's pretty easy. You just say, hey, that's your guy. We just figure it out. If they have to start thinking and reacting whilst panicking, it's my first game in the NFL, I'm starting, oh Lord, Chris Jones is huge and he's quick. How do I do this? He made those guys think. And that was a real problem for them. No one knew who to pick up. And not only is he making those guys think and looking around different angles, where a body's coming from, why is that guy bluffing? He's supposed to come. It's also putting a lot on Lamar Jackson, who has more responsibility than since college at the line of scrimmage. In college, he ran the entire offense for the line of scrimmage. He's not done that in the league. So this year, protections are all on him. So Steve Spagnuolo was saying, okay, you figure out the protections. I'm going to make the young guys think and play on the move. And they just weren't athletic enough. And immediately you could see all their technique and mechanics just vanish as they panic trying to figure out who they're supposed to pick up.
Yeah, and I mean, like you mentioned, like that's an unfortunate sort of like reaction when coaches talk about this all the time, right? They want guys playing free. When you have to sit there and think about it, normally it's so much hesitation that now all of a sudden, like that's all the difference in the world, right? The league is too good. You're going up against the best in the world. If you give them just a split second of hesitation, whether it's in coverage, whether it's a quarterback's throw, whether it's, a juke in open field, or like you said, handling something in the trenches, sometimes that could mean all the difference in the world. From what you're talking about, it does, just to give Ravens fans some hope here, it does seem like those issues are sort of chemistry issues. And maybe we get to the point where it is just like an individual thing. Hey, these guys aren't really able to hold up individually, which I want to get to another point about that in a second. But they are starting three new offensive linemen, right? Patrick Mekar, Daniel Falele playing right guard now, and then Andrew Voorhees as well. So it is three new offensive linemen in that starting lineup. So is it something where again, I want to get to the individual talent in a second, but you watch it and you go, yeah, they're just very clearly not communicating the way that they need to pre-snap, maybe pointing things out correctly, maybe they guessed incorrectly with who was coming and who wasn't, or passing things off correctly when it comes to stunts and twists, or whatever defensive coaching terminology you want to throw out there for it. Is it something where you feel as though as the season goes on, chemistry could definitely help mitigate what we saw against Kansas City when it comes to Baltimore?
Yeah, definitely with that stuff, right? The communication stuff, picking things up post snap, just almost having built in breakers. A lot of what offensive coordinators will do will start learning really quickly, like, hey, on these kind of concepts, my right guard gets nailed. So we'll just move the quarterback landmark slightly. You start kind of adjusting the nuances of your system to be like, there's certain stuff where guys don't hold up as well as they do on other things. So you can start as an entire staff, start figuring out things to make everyone kind of look better. I would way rather have full continuity than just kind of have everyone be above average at all the different spots and you're kind of chopping and changing every week. I would just rather have the continuity and we can build and work around that. And we have a guy who can make magic happen in the backfield as he did on Thursday night. So that's going to help us out too. I just think there's an athletic base and floor that you have to hit. And I just don't think they've got it at right tackle. And the Falale experiment at right guard is just like, that is just a hit or miss, right? That's not something you can kind of figure out with communication. You have a giant guy who is giving up natural leverage and isn't quick off the ball. So then what can we do when the entire league can go back and watch the film and say we leave the B gap open and then we start bringing flies and swoopers and he doesn't know where to be? That is something that's going to take a ton of reps to be able to figure out if he can actually line up at that spot.
Yeah, when you said the attacking the B gap bubble, what is, explain that a little bit more, just so to understand sort of kind of what you're talking about here and how the Chiefs put a lot of the guard play for the Ravens in conflict that game.
Yeah, so it's just the gap on the outside shoulder of the guard. And usually, particularly in base downs, you would have that cover. That's kind of the main goal point of a lot of interior runs is you want to kind of burst through the B gap bubble. It's why teams have kind of changed their front structures in recent years. Leaving that completely vacated on passing downs is pretty unusual, right? Teams usually get into some kind of four-man front and they have split defensive tackles and they fill those two. And even if you're attacking and swooping, that's not often where you will go for it. So it was slightly unusual. And it was more about how they would adjust kind of walking and roaming and meandering around. There was like not a lot of intensity or intent from the Chiefs pre-snap. It was kind of like one guy would wander in there, then he'd wander out. And it was just trying to force those guys to communicate as much as possible pre and post snap. And I think it gave them real problems. And then as the game goes along, they actually, I thought, did a decent job in the third quarter. It was like they had a chance to go away, communicate, figure some things out. They did okay then. Then Spagnuolo flips it on them again, and they start running all these really kooky, creative things that we see a bunch in college with these kind of layered pressures, the odd mirror stuff people may have heard about, which is basically a funnel pressure where you're trying to build your entire front to push the quarterback to one place. Someone can just come and play cleanup. So now you have guys communicating well, but communicating something that means they know exactly where the quarterback is going to be. So it can get really bogged down in the details, I understand, but they were just way behind in terms of the mental side of the game. And when they were figuring things out, Spags threw something new at them, and there was no real answer for them.
Which, again, does make sense, right? And when we talk about, if Ravens fans might be listening to this, it's not total gloom and doom about it. It's an experienced Chiefs defensive front that's still working with the same defense coordinator who's been there for a really long time, and they're still trying to figure it out. You mentioned, Daniel Falele playing that right guard spot. Unfortunately for them, and unfortunately for game one, I think that the reason why you would move Falele into a full-time right guard spot is because of the size, right? It's because of the power. It's what the Ravens want to do. They want to beat you up front. They want to run the football. A lot of people talked about, okay, in the game against Kansas City in the playoffs, they sort of got away from their identity in that regard. And so you knew they were going to kind of get back to it, right? You signed Derrick Henry, and I know John Harbaugh came out and said, we're not going to give him 30 carries a game, but they want to run the football, right? They want to be a running team. And when you look at those three new offensive linemen, a takeaway that I had for the Ravens game is that all of them, Makari, Daniel Falele, Andrew Voorhees, all of them, run blocking grades below 60. And if anything, you would kind of think, all right, at least I'm getting good run blocking production from Falele as an example because of his size. I'm at least getting that. So you understood kind of what the Ravens were doing. And you probably thought to yourself, or they probably thought to themselves, all right, we'll sacrifice a little bit in the pass blocking game. He's not going to be able to move as well. He is giving up that natural leverage, which I think can be tough, but he's just such a massive dude. I think they were hoping to get a lot more production and positively graded plays from the run game. And they didn't get that part from their new guys either, which I think was a detriment to sort of what the Ravens wanted to do, independent even of what Spagnuolo and the Chiefs were doing.
Yeah, exactly. And it comes down to just players. You can have all the fun schematic stuff in the world, and Spags does, and that's why it was such difficulty in pass pro. But you're just facing a front that was just dominant. I mean, they were just talked up, firing off the ball. Chris Jones is all over the place, lining up in 20 different spots. It felt like Carl Laftis was zooming off the ball. Wharton inside was an absolute menace. They had no one who could handle him. All those guys played in different spots. The linebackers were flying everywhere, and so it's just really tough. They just don't have great inline power. Even when, they put Rosengarten in, it's a different style of player at right tackle, but it's not a bunch of boom off the ball. And I don't think Falale, the idea would be, can you get him to kind of a Mailata type level? That is just a complete grader out there, right? And then can he hang in? Is he springy enough to get out and hang in pass pro? That's the style you'd look for. You move it inside. Everything is so quick. Those guys are so fast off the ball. As you mentioned, they've got the natural leverage advantage. He just doesn't bring thunder. That's a twitched up thing, even in that kind of mass. To be able to actually bring thunder off the ball, you can't be slow and cumbersome. And to me, when I watch him, his just feet are so heavy, and that is like almost old school left tackle play, right? And they've stuck it at right guard as kind of their lead front side guy, and it just isn't really adding up for me.
There is something to that, I think. Certainly doing this from an NFL draft perspective as well, when we evaluate people, I think that you look at offensive linemen and offensive line recruits, and they'll be 330, 335, 340, 345, whatever. Like, they'll get up there and wait, and a lot of people say, like, oh my gosh, just the size and the power that these guys have. And it doesn't always translate. The phrase that you use there, bring the thunder or whatever, like, that is something that's very real. You still got to be able to get down, get low, be able to fire off and really create some of that power. And just because you are tipping the scale, maybe even above 340, 350, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're coming off the ball with bad intentions and that you got great explosiveness there. So I think that is also a really good point and something to monitor sort of with the Ravens and some of the guys that they've got out there. Rosengarten, you brought up his name, obviously the rookie that they drafted. They got high hopes for him, but I was surprised that they drafted him because he's not their type of offensive lineman. Like, he is much more of a lighter finesse player. Now, to the point that you just brought up, Rosengarten can get off the ball. He's got some good explosiveness. He's got some springiness to him, but what he was good at Washington was a lot of like the quick footwork, being balanced, being able to hit a landmark at his pass sets. It wasn't necessarily getting off the ball and really moving people in run blocking, but I think they probably drafted him to develop that part of his game. I just don't think I'd expect it in year one. You probably got to go through a full year of being in their system, probably gaining a little bit of weight, training the right way. And so we'll see how it is for Baltimore. Any final thoughts before we kind of wrap up this game and get to another guy?
No, I just think we mentioned Wharton slightly. I think that is just a guy to continue watching. He plays more snaps than Chris Jones, plays up and down the front the same way Chris Jones does, crazy off the ball. To find that guy undrafted, I don't know how they do this every single year. They just find studs from somewhere you've never heard of the college before, you've never heard the name before. All of a sudden, they're making plays in the backfield. It's just uncanny the way they can do this.
Brett Veach truly has one of the best scouting staffs in the business. There's no doubt about it. People, they talk about Andy Reid, they talk about Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones. You need those players to win Super Bowls. There's no doubt about it. But just like the Brady years with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Brady came over, but it was a damn good team when Brady did come over. It takes a full team, and obviously the Chiefs are doing a fantastic job. The next player that I do want to talk about here for this In the Trenches show is a rookie. Let's talk about a guy who is making his debut and was pretty damn impressive in doing so. Joe Alt, now at right tackle for the Los Angeles Chargers, and I thought he had a fantastic debut, Ollie. When you brought him up and you're like, hey, we got to shout out Joe Alt, I was so glad that you did, because to go up against the Raiders front, specifically with Max Crosby, now you add Christian Wilkins in there as well, and to play as well as he did for his first test, and not just his first test either, he's played left tackle his entire career. He didn't play a single snap of right tackle through the 3 years that he was at Notre Dame. And in fact, if you go back to high school, I'm pretty sure he probably played left tackle throughout all of high school as well. I don't think that they would have moved him to right tackle. So I'm sitting here wondering, is this the first time he's ever played right tackle? Now, he's practiced at the position, so it wasn't the first reps ever. But to do that in an NFL game, I thought it was really impressive. But what did you see from Alt when you went back and you watched the tape?
Yeah, I agree with you. I just don't think it's understood enough necessarily how difficult that transition is, that every single part of your life just flips on its head. Your lead foot's different, the radar's different, the sets are different. Like, it is not just as simple as flipping one guy to the other. We undersell how intelligent these players are when they can just come out and do it on like a week's notice and play well in prime time on Sunday Night Football or something like that. It is impossible to do. You take a non-NFL player and try to do it, as I've done myself, and it is an absolute disaster. So we should just credit these guys with what they're actually able to do. It's remarkable. I'm excited to hear your thoughts. I thought it was just everything is advertised, right? The hands, the balance, the recoveries. The recovery strength is unbelievable. Crosby got him a couple of times by just rocking him, and he just eats it. And he can just reestablish the base and recover like very few can. So I think pass pro wise, everything you could ever have dreamed of in a debut, particularly going up against that level of competition. Nothing fazed me in terms of what the Raiders ran. Nothing fazed me in terms of the one-on-one stuff. Had a little bit more difficulty, I would say, when someone was head up, someone smaller, sharper, quicker off the ball. When it was kind of the wide set stuff and it was Crosby one-on-one, he dealt with Crosby easier than he dealt with anyone else, which just almost makes no sense.
Right, and that almost never is the case, but I think that's also a testament to how well Joe Alt approaches the game, right? Because very clearly he understood, I'm the right tackle. I'm going to get a lot of Max Crosby in this game, especially early on. And if I lose a couple of reps to him, they're just going to stick him on that side of the line of scrimmage. Because Crosby can rush from either side of the line of scrimmage. But, we've seen the trends in the NFL over the last, 5-6 years, that you put your best pass rusher often against the right tackle because the left tackle is probably a little bit more talented. So you see a lot of really good guys rushing from that left side of the defense. And I think that, obviously going up against the right tackle, Joe Alt knew that was going to be the case, and he handled him. Man, if you look at the 19 pass blocking reps that he had against either Max Crosby or Christian Wilkins, 0 pressures allowed. Now, there were a couple of times that you mentioned Crosby sort of was able to get around the outside shoulder, but it was in a way that the rush was so wide, it was going to take him too many steps to get there before Justin Herbert could get the ball out anyways, which is, again, it's like a savvy, beyond his years kind of move to say, yeah, all right, I'll give you a little bit of the outside here, because that's the thing with rookie offensive tackles. I think a lot of them believe, man, I can't get beat. And in the NFL, it's just the pass rushers are too good. You've got to give up a little bit somewhere. It's just so rare you get an offensive tackle that can truly protect both the inside and outside shoulders equally well. So when you looked at Alt kind of prioritize that inside shoulder. He's like, I'm not getting beat on the inside. You're not hitting me with an arm over. You're not hitting me with a club where you're coming inside. I'm not going to let you hit a spin move or whatever. I'm not going to let Justin Herbert get Goldberg speared in my first game as an NFL player. That's not going to happen. And so he was protecting that inside shoulder with priority. But then the couple of times that Crosby was like, okay, the outside shoulder, I can sort of attack this and get around it. Alt positioned himself at least well enough to slow him down to where the ball's getting out of Justin Herbert's hands before Crosby could really get around him and around where Justin Herbert was. So that is also something that, as I watched every single pass blocking snap that he had this week, something that really impressed me, because I felt like, again, that was just a veteran approach to the game.
Yeah, and what you see often with the young guys or rookies or guys making their first start, we just mentioned it with the Baltimore guys up front, right? Once they realize the speed, the tenacity of the NFL, and they realize, oh God, Max Crosby's really good. He's even better than I thought he was when I just watched games on Sundays. How is a man that big, that quick? Is they all panic and they narrow their feet on contact. It's one of the big things I look through when evaluating guys in the draft is when you panic, because as you said, it's not the SEC, even though they got great players. It's not the Big Ten, where you may just be the best player on the field and you can just win 60 reps. You're going to lose 4 or 5 reps. These guys are too good. Do they narrow their feet on contact and just go into survival mode and then it's over, right? His ability to just maintain his feet, maintain his balance, be like, even if I lose the initial blast, I can get through the hand fight. And all I have to do is stay just in the right relationship with Justin Herbert. I'm tied to the concept. I'm not working in a vacuum. So even when there were slight struggles, you said, or slightly beaten, I just thought it was really impressive in general. The Chargers and particularly Herbert, it really shows you the discipline of a quarterback who gets the ball out on rhythm, because there could have been reps where we might have been saying, hey, maybe he lost 2 or 3. The rep went on. He just couldn't win the hand fight necessarily. But the ball was out so quick. Herbert was so disciplined. And when he got rid of the ball, Slater played really well on the other side. So in pass pro, I thought it was absolutely everything you could hope for. probably more so, honestly, against that front. And they targeted him early on. They ran overload stuff to be like, we want him one-on-one with Crosby. We're going to wash out rushes in our plan because we think we can get rookie versus Crosby week one. Maybe he has a panic in the second quarter because he's getting beat, right? All the mental side of the game. And he just stood up to it, ate it, and kept playing. I thought there was some concerns in the run game we could maybe get to, but given a really tough assignment, he was just so impressive.
I was going to mention that, when we did our review show with the Chargers and we did the grades release and we put up, the top 5 graded players for every single team, a lot of people looked at how well Joe Alt fared against Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins, and they were wondering, whoa, hold on, why isn't Joe Alt one of the top 5 graded players for the Chargers? How is he not in this list? What's going on? 57 snaps in this game. He earned a 60.7 overall grade. Now, he had a 76.6 pass blocking grade. He didn't allow pressure to Crosby or Wilkins, but he did allow one pressure, so that obviously kind of goes into it a little bit. But if he wouldn't have allowed that pressure, the pass blocking grade would have been even better. The run blocking grade is the reason why the overall grade is lower. 47.8 run blocking grade. So that's sort of where you saw a little bit of the deficiencies. And look, if you got to choose it one way or the other, like if you got to say, hey, rookie offensive tackle, you're either going to succeed in the pass game or the run game, you absolutely want him to hold up the way he did against Crosby and Wilkins specifically. Like that is what the Chargers very clearly emphasize, and they prioritize things correctly there. But, when I was watching him as a run blocker, yeah, I'm very curious to hear what you have to say because you even brought it up even before that I was going to. But I felt like he was for as good as he is when he comes to balance and pass protection, especially from what we saw this past weekend, I felt like the weight was a little bit too forward. He was a little bit too on his toes. He was a little bit too over eager to try to, like you mentioned, you're going up against NFL players. You get a taste in the preseason and training camp or whatever that what it's like to really fire off the ball and hit an NFL defensive lineman and try to move an NFL defensive lineman against their will. That's a different story than it is even when you play big games in college. So I wondered if he was a little on his toes, because if you think about it just from a body composition and physiological perspective, like when you are down and you are launching into a defensive lineman, you are launching off of your quads, right? And so like that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to get lower. He's trying to launch so he can create as much power as possible just to get into that play and really move him off the ball. I felt like maybe he was thinking about that a little bit too much, or he felt like he needed to overextend his power in order to move people. And there were a couple of times that Raiders defensive linemen, specifically as the game went on, realized this, and when they knew it was a run play, there was one example specifically where I can't remember if it was Wilkins or not, but Alt comes off the ball, and it is just the quickest club arm over that you've seen, and boom, he's just in the backfield ready to tackle the running back. But what did you see when we're talking about run blocking from Joe Alt in his debut?
No, you nailed it. I mean, the thing with him in college, and this is kind of the book on him you would expect in the league, right? Can he be a plus run blocker,
right,
and then be a great pass protector? And everyone takes that every single day. Those guys become the highest paid players of their position in the league. That's just the reality of it. And so you will take that. It's fine. He has largely been a kind of snatch and twist type blocker. His arms are so long, he just grabs them on people and he twists them and manipulates them more than he is like a road grading, fire off the ball and drive you into next week. That's just not who I think he's going to be at the NFL level. And I thought, honestly, they gave him some really tough assignments. He's playing on the right side for the first time. He's the backside guy on a bunch of stuff. Really, really difficult blocks. He ends up on the floor on a bunch of those plays where it's like, it's just a really tough block for anyone, let alone if it's not like your go-to thing and you're kind of learning a newish position because you flip the side of the field you're playing on. So that's just really difficult stuff that I think will come along over time. My probably one look out for point would just be the double team stuff. I mean, he got blown up 3 times on double team. It's just really poor coordination with his partner. That stuff has to just be so tight, hip, feet, hands, shoulders, helmet if you want, whether it's the double and we rock together or the double and climb, whatever it is. That stuff has to be so in sync and coordinated, and they just weren't connected at all. And guys just split through them 3 times. He ends up on the floor trying to grab at people.
Right.
That's difficult stuff. And that is if you're not going to be a single lead out, drive people off the ball yourself, that is the Harbaugh playbook, right? It's going to be front side power. You have to be able to rock that double team. So that is the one where it's like, that's where they will need improvement to kind of help the offense. But honestly, if that's what we're getting down to, where it's like, hey, I don't think the double teams are sound and in sync in week 1 as we would like them to be, I would feel unbelievable if I was in the building.
Yeah, again, with all the context of Joe Alt, starting at right tackle for the first time, being on an island, going up against one of the best pass rushers in the NFL, and for that game to play out the way that it did, even with some of the deficiencies being there that we have mentioned, you would take exactly what we saw every time. Like you mentioned, like we would take the one-on-one pass blocking ability and IQ that we saw this past weekend, and you mentioned the chemistry part of things when it comes to double teams and run blocking, like that'll come with time. And what Harbaugh wants to do, if there's any coach that I would bet on to really be able to figure out, run blocking in the run game, Jim Harbaugh is one of those guys. So I think that they hit a home run with Harbaugh. I think that the Joe Alt pick it's funny, we talked about like, they're not going to pick Alt. They've got a good offensive line. They got Slater. They need an offensive weapon. And when the pick was made, it was just like, yeah, of course it was Joe Alt. And now we are seeing in week one, we just go, yeah, of course it was Joe Alt, because we're already seeing some of the fruits of that draft pick there. I got a couple more edge rusher guys specifically that I want to get to, that I want to hear your thoughts on. Before we get to that, TDs, tutties, taking it to the house, in for 6, whatever you want to call touchdowns, one thing is for sure. Touchdowns mean more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Whether it's on the ground, in the air, from special teams, defense, whatever, we don't care how they score them. We just want to bet on them. We want to bet on the touchdowns, and DraftKings is the number one place to bet on touchdowns. We got some really good games coming up. The one that I keep highlighting, Detroit Lions, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think they're going to light up the scoreboard. I think there's going to be plenty of touchdowns scored in that one. And if you're ready to place your first bet, I try doing it on something simple like, hey, I think this player is going to score a touchdown. It's going to be a lot of fun. New DraftKings customers bet $5, get $250 in bonus bets instantly. Plus, you get 1 month of NFL premium on them. You download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, use promo code PFF. That is promo code PFF for new customers to get that $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. And, of course, that NFL Plus premium on them. The offer will end September 19th, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. If you got a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, it is 877-8-HOPE-NY, or you can just text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problems with gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gambling resources, visit dkng.co/FTBALL. NFL Plus premium offer is available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus premium terms at nfl.com/terms. Or we've talked about some guys on the offensive line last couple of segments here. I do want to switch over to the defensive line. A couple of edge rushers that I want to get to that you had mentioned when we were kind of planning this show. One is Keion White from the New England Patriots. The other is Boye Mafe from the Seattle Seahawks. Let's start with Keion White, who was a second-round draft pick coming out of Georgia Tech, and somebody who I felt was raw in his technique as a player, but oh man, when you talk about a guy who has all the tools to play a lot of different positions, even at an NFL level, he was somebody who checked a lot of those boxes. Earned an elite PF grade this past week on 41 snaps, 90.3 overall grade, 90.8 pass rush grade. He had 2.5 sacks, a 14.3 pass rush win percentage. What did you think of Keion White this past week in a upset of the Cincinnati Bengals?
Yeah, I thought he was unbelievable. And it's funny because Keion White himself last week was basically like, I don't know what I'm doing. I just kind of go out there and kind of try to wreak havoc. And I think he's being harsh on himself. I think he's pretty much aware of what he's doing, and he's crushing people. The thing that jumps out with him is, one, they move him around all over the place, right? He's mugged, he's on the edge, he's playing in the interior. On running downs, he plays in the interior, then he can go to the edge. On passing downs, we're so used to the old school Michael Bennett style, right? Of, hey, you play outside early on, then we'll move you inside on late to rush the passer. He can go in, out on any given down. And what I love about him is usually with guys like that, where one of their like high things you list on their scouting report is, hey, he can play all over the front. Unless it's a truly, truly special play, it's usually because they're average to passable, all those different things. He is legitimately excellent in almost every role they put him in. And it's not just that he plays in the different spots. They are able to completely reshape their front based on what they're seeing, because they've got a guy who can play as a true interior defensive tackle fitting the run, who can then also stand up as a mode linebacker or play wide on the perimeter and rush the passer effectively. That is really, really unusual to find that in one body type like that. And you could see it even when he got Trent Brown for the sack. The Bengals run 15, 18 different plays, truly. They have really limited protection rules. And they were able, Giuliani Tavai just came to the line of scrimmage and said, hey, we can just shift the front ever so slightly. You're going to get an easy one-on-one, and there's going to be a massive wide open lane for you to knife back inside. You can see them communicate it, and they can just instantly do it because they've got a guy who can play inside at 3-tech or play outside as a true wide 9 rusher. So just unbelievably impressive. So violent and vicious off the ball, so violent and vicious with his hands, never stops, engine runs for days. Might not be, as you said, still the most technically sound player, but to be able to do all those different, to line up in all those different alignments, do all the different technical responsibilities that are asked of him, and maybe one-on-one as a pass rusher, it's still not like textbook perfect, but I would always take kind of like the Havoc monster who can play in 15 different fronts for us effortlessly. That to me is wonderful technique, and he knows exactly what he's doing.
Well, we've seen guys in the past, sort of have very high athletic or powerful, body types on the defensive line, and they don't work out, right? And I think that people look at that, and when it comes to the draft, they go like, man, this guy doesn't really know what he's doing yet. They'll hear, media or whatever it is, just be like, man, this guy doesn't really know what he's doing, but he's built so well, and fans go, he doesn't know what he's doing. Why are we going to draft him? This is why you draft him, is because like if you hit a player like this, it can mean everything in the world. I've got his snap counts up right here. 37 snaps along the defensive line. 1 at left defensive tackle, 1 at right defensive tackle, 7 at left end, 12 at left outside linebacker, 1 at nose tackle, 5 at right end, 6 at right end, 9 as a right outside linebacker, and then they even have him playing in the box as an inside linebacker at times just because of that weird alignment. You're right. 3 as an left inside linebacker, 1 as a right inside linebacker. No position in the front 7 is safe from Keion White being able to occupy it at any given time, and so it's just so much fun to watch.
The thing that's not shown in that data, it's great as having the alignment data, is how many times he's aligned somewhere else and they shift him just before the snap. Because they can get to any front in their Rolodex they want based on what they see. Because that guy, as you just mentioned, can stand off the ball inside linebacker or play at 1-tech as a defensive tackle. That's not normal. And to be able to perform them at the level he's performing them at. So they are able to just kind of count cards pre-snap based on what they're seeing from the Bengals this week and moving forward. And they have multiple guys who can do this, by the way. Uche is a guy who they move around a bunch too. So if you don't have an A+ Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, the next best things to have is guys who can play in basically any alignment or front you want, and you can just change based on the pre-snap picture to say, we'll at least have some kind of schematic advantage when we uncork our guys who may be B+, A- guys, and not the true blue chippers.
I love the phrase that you just used there. It's almost like they're counting cards, right? It's almost like they know exactly what the offensive line is doing, and then you can shift to something that puts it in your favor before the ball is even snapped. That is a great analogy for it, and I think it's true, kind of how they are using Keion White. You mentioned some of the violence. Violence is also the correct adjective that I would use to describe his game. The two-handed swipe is just getting devastating from this dude. I mean, whether it was guards or tackles, I saw that multiple times. He's got a nasty long arm as well where he can fully extend his arm and he could just drive his legs, getting those offensive linemen on their heels and back, and it gets him into a position where when he sees that free rush lane, wherever it is to get to the quarterback, he takes that long arm and then he can rip them to the side. But I was so impressed with the two-handed swipe. I saw that multiple times. The speed and power in which he has to knock the hands away was just brilliant this past week, and it's a reason why you see an elite PFF passing grade for him. Now, the run blocking grade from him wasn't as high. I believe it was somewhere in the 50s, but that's sort of coming along, right? Again, I think that he's right on track with what you would want. After a rookie year where he's kind of figuring things out at a lot of different spots on a multiple defense for the Patriots, now very clearly he is comfortable as a pass rusher. He's taken that to heart. That's what he wants to do really well. And because of it, I think you saw on some rundowns, he was still sort of in pin your ears back mode, and they were, whether it was, going up against a double team or something, he was out angled, he was out leveraged, and he was just getting pushed off the ball a little bit. That to me will come. He's still 6'5", 285 pounds. Like that power to be able to hold up on the line of scrimmage, to me, that is going to come. And I think the floor of what he will be as a run defender is going to be a little bit higher. But what we were seeing, the ceiling of him as a pass rusher and getting some of those pass rush moves to stay clean, we're seeing some big time success from him already.
Yeah, and that's kind of the downside of being that multiple in the front with one player is you just get some reps where they have the advantage because you've got your perimeter guy playing right inside and he might just get driven off the ball, particularly if he's a guy who just wants to fly upfield, as you mentioned.
Right.
And it's funny because he's almost like the construct the defense is built around. We can move this guy around, but as a team construct defender, knowing where he's supposed to be at all times, that just isn't the player he is. As you said, he wants to fly upfield. He actually almost, everything he does has like a violent undertone to it. When you watch him as the masher on stunts and twists, which is just the first guy through and go and try and create chaos and rip through as many people as you want so you can create a crease for the other guy to swoop around. That's who the masher is. You watch that guy throw his body into just brick walls of other players. It's like the happiest day he's ever had in his life. That's the grunt work of being a defensive lineman. Most guys don't like doing that job. They want to swoop around unblocked and get the sacks and high five everyone. He can't believe his luck that he gets to mash people. Now he brings that to the run game where it's way more about technique and efficiency and angles and body movements. And he's playing with the same hair on fire. Like, I just want to hit everyone. It's funny. There's a great snap where he's rushing the pass. I think it's one of the sacks on Burrow, actually. It is. Where he is driving someone off the ball and he is so engaged in like the one-to-one battle he's having with a lineman that he runs past Burrow in the middle of the line of scrimmage and forgets to look for the quarterback because he's just so fired up to beat someone up on his own. It's like, hey, bro, the job is to tackle the quarterback. That's what we're here for. So I think that stuff and maybe settling down and toning down is like what you would normally say as a coach, right? But why would you settle that guy down when he's firing off the ball like in the pass game? It goes back to the Joe Alt thing. It's like the trade-off is the value is so extreme as a pass rusher. I would not be that worried about having he'll have bad weeks in the run game. That's just who he is. Yeah. But you will get the trade-off of the pass rush upside.
And every coach will take a 6'5", 285-pound dude who just loves to be physical and explode off the ball every single time. I did see that he just happened, randomly, after a 2.5 sack performance to start the season, had a drug test waiting for him at his locker that he needed to take from the NFL. So the NFL also noticed of how good of a week Keion White had. Last guy that I want to talk about that you brought up is Boye Mafe from the Seattle Seahawks. And this was somebody who, going into the year, they've had some upgrades along the defensive line. I think just by proxy of getting Mike McDonald in the building and seeing what he was able to do with the Baltimore Ravens in their front last year, getting the most out of guys like Jadeveon Clowney, for example, we were really excited about what this front could be for Seattle because it was a unit that just straight up had to be better. When Pete Carroll was still the head coach and he talked about where they needed to get better over the last couple of years, he emphasized the trenches. He's like, we have to be much better along the defensive line. And they were acquiring talent in their secondary, and we saw that secondary pay off in a big way yesterday with some fantastic performances from everybody, the corners, the safeties. But I think the defensive line really went into that, and I thought Mafe played really well as a player who a lot of people identified as a guy who needed to step up on that defensive line. I think he took a step in the right direction this past week, but what'd you see from week one of Mafe in the 2024 season?
Yeah, I think he took a step forward. It was not as big a leap as I was expecting when I just saw the raw numbers and I was like, okay, I'll go watch the tape. I was thinking in the back of my mind, it's like, well, how much of this is like unblocked pressures because Mike McDonald's arrived and he's doing all the exotic creative stuff. They're simming, they're creeping, they're blitzing, all this stuff. And if they confuse Bo Nix and his unblocked pressures, to be fair to Boye Mafe, a lot of it was just 4 down and go front, and he was just creating hurries all on his own. I still think there's some technical deficiencies there. I think a lot of it is still just getting by on feel and athleticism, and where he has improved, I think, is turning the corner and having a better sense and arc to the quarterback. Again, that comes down to, well, you're playing a rookie. He didn't really have the feel in that game, and maybe you play a better player and you just don't get those kind of style of hurries, still not finishing as much as you would want to really get the kind of monster production he could have had out of that game, given how he set people up. Still got the jolting speed off the snap, but he just doesn't, given the body type and who he could be, a true 3-way rusher, right? Knifing inside, drive through someone, dip around the edge. The one that's missing for me still is the true speed to power for the play he could be. And I think most of that comes down to technique.
When I was watching a lot of his rushes and a lot of his snaps, just getting ready for this show, he played 60 snaps this past week, 70.4 overall grade, 73.5 run defense grade, 66.6 pass rush grade. He ended up having 1 sack and 9 pressures. You mentioned kind of converting a little bit more of those into backfield production. They were in that sort of, I'm sort of hesitant to say 3-4 because it's sort of like so multiple, like sometimes it can look a little bit different, but they were sort of in a set where they allowed Mafe to really rush from a sharp angle, a very straight line. Like he was aligned as like a wide 7 or a wide 9, like way out from where the offensive tackle or the strong side tight end was, and he was able to sort of just like run in a straight line. And to me, that definitely helps because it will give him more space to operate attacking either shoulder. Like you mentioned, he's got the speed to be able to do it, especially if he continues to develop those inside shoulder counters. We know he can kind of rush around the edge, but it is that speed to power. It's giving him even a little bit more of a runway to convert that speed to power that might end up making him the best version of a 3-way edge rusher that we have seen before. Because, if he was lined up as a true 5 technique defensive end, we don't really have the runway. When you talk about converting that speed to power, you've got to be able to do it in probably 2 steps before you are up and into the offensive tackle. Now, when you're more as a wider 7 or 9 technique kind of rusher, you've got 3 or 4 steps to really get up steam and get into that offensive tackle and really be able to bull rush him a little bit. So I wondered, that was the main thing that I noticed with him is that, I didn't put him a ton under the microscope last year, so it might be something that they have done with him all along. But for his skill set, I like the fact that they are putting him in that alignment, and I feel like you could get probably the best version of whatever he is. And I'm glad that Mike Macdonald realizes that early and has him in that sort of setup. What do you think?
Yeah, these are the nuances of coaching individual players. We saw this a bunch with Rashawn Gary in Green Bay, where people would tweak with kind of his individual tilt compared to the front structure, and getting guys to tilt and move inside and say, you just compress and you can just attack in a straight line is the easiest way to kind of coach these younger guys who maybe have the crazy athletic traits, but they're not getting the production you want early on. It's just really easy to say you run through that guy's chest. If he's overset, you go inside. If he undersets, you go outside. You can really simplify the game for them. To do that, the reason it was so effective with Gary is his best go-to move was just run through someone's grill and really collapse the pocket from one side, right? And then you get more of the speed rush from the other way, and you get this really nice overlay of the pass rush. That's not Boye Mafe's game right now. To me, it's mostly about you have to time up your hands and your feet. That's how you generate power. You can't just go with one or the other, right? And with him, he is just not always in sync and aligned with when he's timing up the feet and the hands. And it's actually something that's really easy and correctable and coachable. Byron Young at Tennessee is the example I always use. He was a mess in college at timing up his feet and hands. I had no idea where they were supposed to be. I remember writing and talking at the time. It's like, man, if you give him one off season with a good coach, you can correct this in like 10 weeks. And then you can get a player who can be really productive. So I think just more time with him. And if that's what they're settling into, is that's how we're going to align him consistently. So it's kind of the same playing, the same reps over and over again. Hopefully that development comes quicker. It's not always easy for every player. They've run the same way a lot of their lives. They've rushed the pass the same way a lot of their lives.
Right.
But if he can do that and start timing the hands and feet appropriately, then you'll get the natural power to come through. And that's when you can start being the true 3-way guy.
There we go. A lot of trench players that we talked about here in week 1. Let us know what you guys think of some trench players that you were able to notice from week 1 as well. You can do that in the YouTube comment section. That's a great way to do that. If you loved hearing what Ollie had to say, check out more of his work over at The Read Optional. He does a fantastic job breaking down these, not just trench players, but just the NFL game overall. And obviously it's a lot of high-level stuff. So go check that Substack out. Ollie, this is fantastic, man. I appreciate you joining me for this first show. I'm looking forward to doing many more with you throughout this season.
Yes. Thanks for having me. Let's have a great season.
Yeah, man. I'm very much looking forward to it. Let us know kind of what you guys are seeing around the NFL as well in the comment section. We can only watch so much between the next 2 days. We're going to watch a lot over the next couple of days as well to make sure that we're giving you the trends, the individual performances every Tuesday here as we do this show. But we want to hear from you guys as well, what you have seen from your favorite team. That's the best way to do that. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That is Ollie Connolly. Thank you guys so much for watching the first episode of In the Trenches. We will see you for another Trench episode next week.